Where are you? Good morning, everybody. I am Stuart Maxwell from Scholarly IQ. If you're not familiar with Scholarly IQ, we provide sort of data and reporting services for various different publishers. But a bit of a further background for me, this might be the one, yep, is that I have worked in standards for quite a few years in the past, particularly in the media industry. Which one will this be? I probably should have put my glasses on. So I've worked in areas like sort of the media industry and also actually on Project Counter when it was released, about how at ABCE we sort of advised on the sort of the standards and the audit program and adoption on it. So what I'm going to do is kind of talk through some of those aspects for what we do and around a sort of maturity model for standards adoption. There's been a lot of work, as you've heard, about looking at definitions and use cases and kind of really what Altmetrics are. And what we're trying to do is raise some transparency and some trust to get some understanding about really what Altmetrics are and how you can use them. As a customary sort of show of hands, who in the room has ever read any definition about how any Altmetrics are gathered and how they work? Okay, quite a few. If you're from an Altmetrics provider, put your hand down. How many have we got left in the room? A few. I don't know how long it took you to find the information, but that's obviously something there as well. But if we're starting to use the metrics, there's maturity coming through on these, we want to really kind of understand what they are, how they mean. Okay, as Greg was saying, different measurements. In fact, even using the same tool, if you get a ruler or a tape measure and you measure how long something is, it'll say centimeters on one side and inches on the other. But if you just give the number, what the hell does that mean? I don't know. Okay, so you always need that context. So when we look at standards, there's certain things we want them to be. We want them to be industry-owned. Okay, so coming through, NISO has taken representations from providers, from publishers, and from librarians, kind of an unholy triumvirate to get together to say, okay, what do we agree these to be? They've got to be open, not owned. They've got to be industry standard. And they've got to be flexible there. We don't want them to have to be something which is onerous, because any altmetric provider is going to say, you know what, I'm not going to do that if it's going to take me 3 members of staff all the time in the world to keep on keeping these things updated. They can't do that. They can't be overly costly to do it. So we're looking at a starting point for this. They've got to be achievable is what we're looking for, and cost effective. So they've got to give value on the levels of trust that you want to see, but they've got to be achievable for the altmetrics providers to provide that level of transparency. And from that, we want to see more consistency. We'd love to see the altmetric providers and the data they're providing being used in really productive ways. So that if you're looking at things, as Tracy said about stuff like looking at commissioning authors, the altmetrics are helping you to do that because you've got confidence in what they're doing. So often when we look at sort of standards adoption, we kind of look at it through this kind of maturity model. So starting right at the bottom corner, we've got the initial measurements. Somebody's got this idea, we're going to measure this, what are we going to do? Well, we've got some numbers, let's put them out there. They're very much more sort of internal, ad hoc numbers perhaps. As those companies are providing altmetrics, they get more mature and they're saying, look, let's make sure we've got consistency over the metrics we're having. Those kind of internal measurements are there. They document those processes. They make sure that they have that governance internally for the metrics they have, and then they're sharing those. So they're confident we're providing a service, we've got consistency there. But as these become more public and as they become more used, we look to say, look, well, actually, where's the accountability? Tell us how they do that. If anybody's ever found and read through the definitions about how an altmetrics provider did it, how easy was it to find that information? And then if you're looking at one provider, how do you understand that in context of another provider? Okay, where do these two measure up? So then we're trying to get to that definition, make them transparent. But if we're going to go further than that, we want some real trust and understanding. We're putting more value to it. And so value is the key point here. We want them more managed. We want them open. We want the users of them, if they have questions about them or if there is a possible sort of lack of understanding, there's a feedback mechanism so that we can come back around and say to the altmetric provider, hang on a minute, has this changed? If there's a change in methodology or measurement, is that documented? Again, is it transparent? And right at the full end of it, if you ever get to there, is a kind of a governed relationship for it, where you maybe have a third-party audit, an independent body that goes along and does that. Now, we're not proposing on all this that we're right at that end stage, because we're kind of, we're on early stages at the moment. But it's kind of up to sort of the market and the community to really sort of decide where are we, where do we want to be, and what do we want the altmetrics to do. So the standards and the document and the recommendations and the code of conduct have been developed as a kind of a progression along this. And it's out there on the, it's had the public comment parts, but where do we want it to go to? And that's something which I'll probably, if we have some discussion, it'd be interesting to know everybody's points of view on that. But The governance side is going to take a lot more commitment, ongoing management, and investment to do it. So there's probably somewhere, hopefully, in between that's going to give us that first starting point about sort of raising this trust in Altmetrics. Okay, so what the code of conduct done, as Greg's mentioned some of this, is there's an industry-agreed, a NISO set, so it's coming across sort of the different people, stakeholders involved in it, to say this is a reporting table. So it's nicely laid out. I think there's something like 13 or 14 questions, okay, with little boxes to fill that in, and for people to do that on an annual basis, to update it and make it publicly available. And don't hide it somewhere back at the end of the website, or it's only on print, and it's only in your office. You know, the idea is to make it publicly available and easy to find. It's there as, again, an earlier sort of adoption model for it to be self-documented. So it's kind of the code of conduct is a best practice, asking people to say, stand up and tell us a bit more. And these are kind of the categories we'd like to know about. Again, it's for them to say this is where it is, but then it's open to public scrutiny. And if people in the room or researchers say, actually, I don't quite understand that, then that feedback mechanism allows them to come back and say, can you clarify that? Okay, so it's kind of the community helping to drive that adoption. Okay, you won't be able to read this, but it's on the documents. But essentially, kind of what we've got is the 13 or 14 odd questions, and then there are the code of conduct recommendations. So Greg mentioned about the replicability, the transparency, and the accountability. And so we've got different categories of those. And what we've done is divided certain questions in, and some of the questions answer more than one of the categories. So what we do is we try to minimize the number of questions, but as a certain number of questions which actually just allows us to cover the key aspects which the NISO working groups decided these are the things that we want to help try to communicate. So have a look at the tables and see where they are. And as Greg said, there are some examples out there we've already filled for some of the providers to kind of give some ideas on those. So then for the governance side, where are we? At the very minimal level, what we'd like to see would be self-reporting, okay? An annual update, so a commitment to say, just go and refresh it, make sure each year you're doing it, to make it easily accessible, and then to have a feedback mechanism back to the Altmetric provider to say, okay, here we are. Okay, this is my question about it. Can we do that? A preferred way, where we might get to after a bit of sort of adoption from it, might be to have something like a third-party place where this information could be posted. Okay, maybe some form of submission process where there is maybe the industry might turn around and say, well, if we're going to have an independent place for it, might there be a kite mark? Okay, so that you could say, well, this is posted up on www. whatever it would be. Okay, and somebody then is managing that, it's posted up there, it's made sure it's refreshed, and then there's that feedback mechanism. I don't know, it's up to you guys if you want to do that. And then maybe an optimal thing would be when we get to maturity, might be something whereby there is, that sort of those checks as we have, with Counter you get the audits. With other different areas you get those independent verifications. These are metrics, so they are measured, and then how do we double check those to make sure they are doing what they're doing? That's too far down the line at the moment, but it's possibly where we want to get to. Okay, so that's kind of where we are, okay, with the code of conduct, the work that's been done to try and get these definitions, how are people using them, what do they mean, how do we increase trust and transparency in it? So that's kind of everything I had to say about it. I hope we've got some good time for some questions, and I hope you've all got some great questions. So thank you very much.